There is a moment, right before you make the mistake again, when some quiet part of you already knows what's about to happen. You've been here before. The same argument, the same choice, the same ending. And somehow, you walk into it anyway. But what if that moment of knowing is trying to tell you something far deeper than bad luck? Maybe it's the relationship that always ends the same painful way. Maybe it's the job you keep leaving under the same circumstances. Maybe it's the promise to yourself you keep breaking quietly when no one is watching. You call it a coincidence, but some part of you has started to wonder, because coincidences don't usually have a pattern, and this one does. Here is the contradiction no one prepares you for. You are intelligent. You've read the books. You've had the insight. You know exactly what you're doing wrong. And yet, knowing has never been enough to stop it. If understanding could fix this, wouldn't it already be fixed? That contradiction isn't a flaw in you, it's a clue. Nearly a century ago, a Swiss psychiatrist noticed something strange in his patients. Certain words made them hesitate. Certain memories made their hands tremble before their minds even registered why. He began to suspect that the conscious will was not actually running the show. What he discovered would change how we understand every mistake we can't seem to stop making. Carl Jung called them complexes. Not the everyday meaning of the word, but clusters of emotion, memory, and unresolved feeling that live inside us, separate from our conscious control. And here is what unsettled even Jung himself. These clusters don't just sit quietly. They can act. Let's step into how something inside you could be steering your life without asking permission. Jung tested this in a simple experiment. He read people a list of ordinary words. Most were answered instantly, but certain words caused a delay, sometimes a full second longer than normal, along with a flicker of unease the person couldn't explain. Something below awareness had been touched, and once touched, that hidden something didn't just react. It began to repeat. Perhaps you've noticed it in your own life. A particular tone of voice that makes you defensive before you've even heard the sentence. A certain kind of person you're drawn to again and again despite the outcome always being the same. That isn't randomness. That's a complex, quietly at work. And the strangest part is how normal it feels while it's happening. Jung put it plainly. Everyone assumes they have complexes, tucked away and manageable. What most people never realize is the far more unsettling truth. Sometimes the complex has you, and when something inside you takes the wheel, it doesn't ask where you'd like to go. This is why willpower alone so often fails. You are not simply forgetting a lesson. You are colliding again and again with a part of your own mind that was never given the chance to speak, so it learned to act instead. But why would any part of you want to keep repeating pain? Jung believed the unconscious isn't chaotic. It's purposeful. When something inside remains unresolved, it doesn't fade quietly. It searches for a way to be noticed, and if you won't listen inwardly, it will find a way to happen outwardly, again and again, until you do. He described this with a single, haunting psychological rule. When an inner conflict is never made conscious, Jung warned, it doesn't disappear. It reappears outside of us, disguised as circumstance, as bad luck, as fate. What we refuse to face within ourselves, the world seems determined to keep showing us. Which means the pattern in your life may not be happening to you. It may be speaking through you. Think about the pattern that keeps returning in your life. Not the surface event, but the feeling underneath it. Abandonment, not being enough, losing control. That feeling has likely visited you in many different costumes, wearing the face of different people, different jobs, different chapters. Because it was never really about any one of them. Modern psychology has its own word for this. Researchers call them schemas, rigid emotional blueprints formed early in life, often before we had the language to understand what was happening to us. A blueprint built in childhood doesn't ask permission to keep running in adulthood. And blueprints, once built, are remarkably good at reproducing the same structure over and over. Here's what makes this so difficult to interrupt. Your mind isn't only trying to make you happy, it's trying to make the world feel predictable. And to a nervous system shaped by early pain, familiar suffering can feel safer than an unfamiliar peace it has never learned to trust. Which means, strangely and painfully, the mistake might feel like home. This is not a character flaw. It is a nervous system doing exactly what it was built to do: seek certainty. And certainty, to a wounded part of you, doesn't mean happiness. It simply means knowing what happens next, even when what happens next hurts. So the deeper question isn't why you keep repeating this. It's what part of you is still trying to be understood. Jung had a name for the parts of ourselves we push out of view because they feel too painful, too shameful, or simply inconvenient to face. He called it the shadow. Not evil, not dangerous, simply unseen. And what stays unseen doesn't vanish. It waits in the dark, running quietly in the background. And a shadow that has never been looked at directly has a peculiar way of appearing everywhere, except where you're looking. Here is where it gets uncomfortable. Jung observed that whatever we refuse to see in ourselves, we tend to see vividly in others. The co-worker who infuriates you, the partner whose flaw you cannot forgive. Sometimes what irritates us most in someone else is a mirror we haven't recognized yet. This is called projection, and it is one of the shadow's favorite disguises. So the pattern you keep repeating, the person you keep attracting, the argument you keep losing to the same version of yourself, none of it is fate in the mystical sense. It's an unfinished conversation your own psyche has been trying to have with you for years. Which raises the question researchers on the neurological side have been asking too. Why can't we just decide to stop? Neuroscience offers a humbling answer. Insight and behavior are stored in two different systems in the brain. One holds what you know, the other holds what you do. And knowing something with total clarity does not automatically rewrite the deeper, older system that actually runs the habit. Which means the shame you feel for repeating the mistake may be aimed at the wrong target entirely. This is not an excuse to give up. It's a release from a lifetime of self-blame. You were never simply weak-willed. You were carrying an old, well-worn groove in a much older part of your mind, one that insight alone was never designed to erase. But if insight can't erase it, what actually can? Jung's answer was never about forcing change through willpower. It was about integration, bringing the hidden part into conscious relationship instead of letting it operate in the dark. He believed the goal of a whole life wasn't perfection, it was honesty with yourself, one uncomfortable layer at a time. This process has a name, and it's far gentler than most people expect. Jung called this process individuation, the lifelong journey of becoming the person you actually are, rather than the person your defenses built to survive. It doesn't mean becoming someone new. It means finally meeting the parts of yourself that have been waiting, patiently, in the dark. And that meeting usually begins with a very small, very quiet act. It begins with noticing, without judgment, the moment the pattern starts. Not stopping it yet, just noticing. The tightness in your chest before the old argument, the pull toward the familiar type of person, the urge to disappear right when things start going well. Because you cannot integrate what you refuse to notice, this is where the word association test still matters today. Notice which words, which situations, which tones of voice cause the smallest delay in you, the flicker before you respond. That flicker is a doorway. It's the exact location where an old complex still holds its charge. Most people spend their whole lives avoiding that doorway, but avoidance was never the way through. Once you can name the pattern, something remarkable happens. The complex loses some of its grip. Jung believed that consciousness itself is a kind of light, and whatever it touches can no longer operate entirely in secret. Naming isn't the end of the work, but it is the turning point. From here, the deeper question becomes, what was this pattern actually trying to protect? Almost every repeating mistake was at some point a form of protection. The person who keeps sabotaging closeness may be guarding against the terror of being truly seen and rejected anyway. The one who keeps overworking may be defending against the fear of being worthless without achievement. The shadow rarely hides something shameful. More often it hides something tender. This is why shame-based approaches to change so often fail. You cannot force a frightened, protective part of yourself into retirement by yelling at it. It only tightens its grip. What it actually needs is what it never received the first time: attention, patience, the sense that it's finally safe to stand down. So, the real work isn't fighting the pattern, it's finally listening to what it's been guarding all along. Modern therapy has developed practical ways to support exactly this kind of change. One method involves gently revisiting the original memory where the pattern began, not to relive the pain, but to offer that younger part of you something new, a different ending, a voice that finally responds with care. Because the past cannot be rewritten, but how it lives inside you can. Another practical step is surprisingly simple. Decide, in advance, exactly what you'll do the next time the old trigger appears. Not vague willpower, but a clear plan. When this happens, I will do this instead. Research shows this small act of preparation dramatically increases your odds of choosing differently. Because in the heat of the old pattern, the wiser part of you needs a plan already waiting. None of this works, though, if your body is still sounding the alarm. Before you can think your way through an old pattern, you often need to calm the nervous system, triggering it. A few slow, deliberate breaths can quiet that alarm, just enough for the wiser part of you to finally be heard. Because a mind in crisis cannot choose freely, a mind that feels safe finally can. Perhaps you've noticed that the moments you feel most triggered rarely really about the present moment at all. A raised voice becomes a childhood home. A moment of silence becomes abandonment. The mind time travels instantly, and it happens so fast you rarely catch it happening. But once you can catch it, even a second later than usual, everything begins to shift. This is the quiet miracle Jung pointed toward. The moment you notice the past intruding on the present is the exact moment you stop being ruled by it, even briefly. That flicker of awareness is not small. It is the entire hinge on which a different future turns. And every time you find that hinge, it becomes a little easier to find again. It's worth saying plainly, this work is not fast, and it was never meant to be. Genuine change in the deeper procedural layers of the mind unfolds slowly, often over many weeks of steady, unremarkable practice, not one dramatic breakthrough. Which means the goal was never to never slip again. The goal is to slip less and recover faster. And here is something worth releasing right now if you're still carrying it. Missing a day, slipping back into the old pattern once, doesn't erase your progress. The research is detailed. A single stumble barely affects the deeper learning curve at all. Only abandoning the process entirely does that. So the fall was never the failure. Staying down would have been. Slowly, something begins to change in how you relate to your own history. The old pattern stops feeling like a life sentence. It starts to feel like an old, worn coat you're finally allowed to take off. One that fit a much younger, much more frightened version of you. And underneath that coat, it turns out, you were never as broken as the pattern made you believe. This is what Jung meant by wholeness. Not the absence of your shadow, but a relationship with it. Not perfection, but honesty. A person who has done this work still has flaws, still has old echoes, but they are no longer strangers inside their own mind. And that changes everything about how the story continues from here. Think of the specific pattern that brought you to this video. The relationship, the habit, the recurring feeling of falling short. It has likely been trying to get your attention for a very long time, in the only language it knew how to speak: repetition. What would it feel like to finally answer it, instead of running from it one more time? You don't have to solve your entire history tonight. You only have to notice, the next time the familiar feeling rises, that it might be older than the moment you're in. That single act of noticing is not small. It is the beginning of every real change that follows. And noticing, done gently and repeatedly, is how a lifelong pattern finally begins to loosen its grip. Jung once wrote that people will go to remarkable lengths to avoid facing their own inner world. But he also believed that whoever looks inward, honestly and without flinching, eventually wakes up. Not to perfection, to presence, to finally being the author of the pattern instead of its prisoner. And waking up, even slowly, changes the entire shape of the story from here forward. The mistake you keep making was never proof that something is wrong with you. It was evidence of something unfinished, quietly asking, again and again, to finally be understood. And understanding, real understanding, doesn't happen all at once. It happens exactly like this. One honest, unhurried moment at a time. Which brings us back, gently, to where we began. There is a moment, right before you make a different choice for the first time, when some quiet part of you already knows what's about to happen. You've done the noticing, you've done the listening, and somehow this time you walk through the doorway differently. That moment doesn't erase everything that came before it. It simply means the pattern no longer walks alone. You are not behind. You are not broken. You are simply a person whose mind, in its own imperfect way, has been trying to protect you the entire time. The work now isn't punishment, it's partnership, with the parts of yourself that have been waiting patiently to finally be seen. And that partnership is the quiet foundation every lasting change is built on. So the next time the familiar feeling rises, the same ache, the same pull, the same old ending waiting to happen, pause. Just for a breath, not to fix everything, just to notice. That single pause is where your story quietly begins to change. And every honest pause makes the next one easier to find. The hidden reason you keep repeating the same mistakes was never a curse. It was an old, unheard part of you, finally learning it's safe to speak and safe to be heard. Wholeness was never about becoming someone new. It was always about finally, gently, coming home to yourself. If some part of this felt like it was speaking directly to you, that recognition is worth sitting with. Subscribe to The Healing Mind for more journeys into the unconscious patterns quietly shaping your life. And share this with someone who might need to hear it today.